Hey YouTube, welcome to my video in my workshop. In this video I'm going to build this workbench here. I'm going to start out with this 2 foot by 4 foot base workbench, and if that's all you're looking for, then once that's done, go ahead and stop the video. But once I'm done with that, I'm going to continue on. I'm going to build the full height bench here with the 8 foot backing, which has a 4 foot by 4 foot white pegboard on it, and then on top of that another 2 foot by 4 foot shelf for storage. And then I'm going to be adding this drawer down under the workbench to add even more usefulness and efficiency to the build. So let's get started. I've built and used many of these same benches, 16 of them now, and my oldest has been in use for almost 20 years. You can see them here lining my workshop, connected together at the top, each with its own 4 foot light and many with that same utility drawer. I start out by cutting the legs, front, and sides. I'm using my integrated table saw and compound miter saw workbench, which I have another build video on here. I cut 4 36-inch legs, and next 4 front and back pieces for each shelf. These are 41 inches long, but that will depend on the orientation you choose to use with the legs. And then the 4 short side pieces. Again, length of that will depend on how you choose to orient the legs. You can turn the legs like this so that the larger dimension of the 2x4 covers the larger dimension of the desk, or you can turn the legs like this, which gives you a little more room in the front, but at the cost of a little bit of stability of the desk. Either way though, these are very stiff and rigid workbenches. I'm going to be using these GRK cabinet screws. These are star-driven screws. They're absolutely fantastic to work with. Once I started using them, I never want to use Phillips head again. Phillips are designed specifically to limit the torque that gets applied to them, so you're always slipping out. The star drive on these, the screws stick to it easily. You can easily drive a 2 or 3 inch screw with barely any lead force on it, and they come with the bit. So I highly recommend using these and moving away from Phillips wherever you can. Okay, these are the bits that come with the GRK screws to drive them, and just so you can see how good they are at hanging onto screws, you can just stick it right on there. It doesn't even fall off. And these are 2-inch screws. I like to put a little pocket hole on the side pieces, the front and side pieces, to pull into the leg and make assembly a little tighter, a little more rigid. But to do this, you want to leave space for the bracket that we're going to connect them with later. So on each side, let's get one away from a knot, we're going to put a little hole here, come in at an angle, and that will give us enough room to drive a screw in and pull it to the piece that we're connecting to. So I'm going to start about an inch away. Start perpendicular and then come in at an angle until you get about 35-40 degrees off, and then make sure you get in there enough that you're going to bite the wood real good. And that's what it looks like. So once we drive the screw in there, it's going to pop out of here and pull into the next piece. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Okay, side pieces are done now. Let's do the front and back long pieces. So I like to get these screws started in these little pocket holes. Just catching a couple threads on there. These are not structurally critical connections. These just help in the assembly. Okay, we got the 36-inch legs cut, the 41-inch front and back shelf supports that connect the legs, and I believe they're 21-inch side shelf supports. They each have pocket holes drilled into them and screws set in those. So let's go ahead and start assembling. Okay, these are the shelf brackets I'm using. These are Simpson Strong Ties. You'll find these or something similar at your local big box retailer, hardware store, Home Depot, Lowe's, etc. They might look a little bit different, but the basic premise is they allow you to meet 3 2x4s together perpendicularly and drive screws in to hold them all together. They provide a really nice, tough, rigid corner connection. So I love these. I've used them on all of my benches, and some of them are going back 20 years and still work great. Okay, we're going to start with laying 2 legs down. Putting in 2 connectors between those. The legs, of course, are the vertical side of the connectors. And then we get 1 long front piece. Now you can see the benefit those pocket holes with the screws in them will have. They'll pull this together before we drive the rest of the screws in. I use 2-inch screws there. In the rest of the spots, I'll just use 1 or 1 1/4. Now do the 2 side pieces. And as you see, these end up hiding these pocket holes. Not a big deal, you don't need to. I don't care if they're exposed, but it just makes assembly a little bit easier. Okay, now we're going to do the shelving. Slide these up from the bottom. The height of this shelf is whatever you find most convenient. I like to make sure there's enough room for a pallet jack to get under there. So maybe 2 or 3 inches under it is available. That's exactly 3. So let's do 3 on this side. Yeah, I'm at 3 there too. With that measured out, we go ahead and tighten this bottom shelf front piece with the pocket screws, add the sides and the rest of the brackets, and then the legs on the other side, and then all the internal screws. The assembly here is pretty obvious and straightforward. Alright, there we go. We've got all the inside screws done. Not bad. I'm then going to go ahead and stand it up and fit the top shelf on. I'll use a 3/4 inch thick piece of plywood on the top, and on the bottom shelf I usually use a 1/2 inch. I went ahead and added the outside screws and then screwed the top into the rest of the workbench frame. Now you don't want to over tighten these because they'll just start stripping away the wood. And if you see them spinning and not going in any further, you're over tightening them. Okay, we got that all screwed together. Pretty sturdy. We just need to do the bottom shelf. All we're going to do is notch the corners out, slide it in there, screw it in. And then I cut the corners out of the bottom shelf with the jigsaw to make room for the legs. Alright, there you go. Took just about an hour to do that. Got a bench that will probably last a decade or more. And yeah, pretty cool. Now you can stop here if that's the kind of bench that you want. I do a couple mods on these benches. First of all, I make them taller. Here's a picture of that. And I put a 2-foot overhang on the top and a 4x4 pegboard in the back. And on some of them, I add a drawer here in the front. So I'm going to go through those step by step. If this is the only bench that you wanted, just feel free to stop here. If you're looking at making some of these other modifications, keep watching. I start out by clamping 2x4s vertically to the back legs of the bench, starting with one clamp and then using the level to make sure it's vertical, then adding the second. and then driving in two 2.5-inch screws. And then repeat on the other side. In my benches, these are 88 inches tall, which ends up being a good height for the 4 foot by 4 foot pegboard with a shelf on the top. I lay the bench front side down and screw the brackets to the top of each back post, and then add the horizontal top piece. With the bench upright again, I finish screwing in the brackets. Okay, at this point I like to make the pegboard next, the pegboard backing. This is a 4 foot by 4 foot piece of pegboard. It was cut in half from a 4 by 8 at Home Depot, which I think was 20 bucks for the whole sheet, and they cut them in half for free. Pick up a couple of those, they're very handy, and you're never going to feel like you got too much pegboard. So I like to you need some sort of backing to these to space them away from whatever wall they're on, because the hooks need some room behind it. So I like to get these 1x2 boards and frame out this thing with the 1x2s. You can screw the pegboard directly to your vertical backing posts, but it ends up being quite wobbly if you do that. I would glue these strips and then clamp them to the pegboard, and then flip it over and screw it in from the pegboard side. So now I'm going to screw these in with 1-inch screws. They will stick out a tiny bit, like a 0.5 millimeter on the other side. It's so little that you can just push them into the board when you put it up on the bench. You want to be careful not to go too close to the ends of these because they are easy to split. With the framing glued and fastened in, I remove the clamps, flip it back over, and add the middle piece, and then clamp that with a 2x4. With that, you can go ahead and attach the pegboard to the back posts of the workbench. I then add the sides to the top shelf, and for the front of the top shelf, I first start the screws, putting 2 in on each end. So when you finally add this, all you need to do is hold it up with one hand and drive the screws with the other. Next are the gussets that will support the upper shelf. I started screws in these as well, using pocket holes to make sure the screws will drive in perpendicular to the back posts of the bench. Push your upper shelf up when fastening these gussets, and use a level to help make sure your upper shelf is straight. Put a 2 foot by 4 foot piece of plywood onto that top shelf frame you made, and then go ahead and screw it down.
Well, okay, there you have it. 4x4 pegboard is on the back, 2x4 shelf on the top. Looking pretty good. We're getting a very useful desk here. If this is as far as you wanted to go ahead and stop the video. But I'm going to go even further, and I'm going to add a nice drawer down here that will handle quite a lot of weight. So if you're interested in doing that, stick around.
First, I'm going to clear all that other stuff out of the way and move the workbench over to its designated spot.
Okay, we got that all set up, put into its destination position. I'm going to go ahead and add a drawer to this, just like this drawer, and add a light and some power strips.
First, I'm going to cut 2 side mounts for the drawer. I'm going to switch to 2x3s for these, and of course the depth of this is 24 inches, so just 2 of those. Okay, I got those cut, and I'm going to be using this sliding drawer mechanism. You can pick it up at your local big box hardware store. This one is 24 inches, so it takes the full depth of the desk. One package comes with 2 rails, so one package is enough for a drawer. This is going to get mounted to the side pieces that I just cut, and then a square frame for the drawer itself will be made, a base added to that, and then a front cover to the drawer. I usually mount these 5 inches down from the underside of the main front support beam here. So these will get attached here at 5 inches, and then I'll attach the rails to those. Okay, I usually use 2.5-inch long screws to mount these side rails to the inside of the benches, but I'm out of those, so I'm going to go ahead and use 2 inchers. But I just used a spade bit to add about an extra 1/2 inch in here. to make sure the screws were going to have a sufficient amount of gripping distance. I just went ahead and drilled 2 on one end and 1 on the other. I've found that pretty sufficient for even decent amount of weight going into the drawers. Okay, I'm going to mark that bench approximately where I want the base of the side support to go, which in my desks I usually do about 5 inches. I'm going to line the front of this up with that. It looks pretty good. And I'm going to drive one of these screws in. Okay, now with one of those screws in, I'll take my level, put it on the board, climb under here, level it, and screw the back one in. And then go ahead and screw that second front, third total one. There we go. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Okay, I pretty much do a similar process with the drawer slides. First, taking out the end piece and then screwing them in and leveling them out. I cut 2 more 24-inch long pieces of 2x3. These are going to be the sides of the drawer, 24 inches, because that's still the depth of the desk. And I attached the inner rails to those. I left about a 1/4 inch gap on the bottom and pretty much pressed the ends with the bent upward tab as close to the edge as possible, leaving the open edge on the other end. And these pieces now just slide right back on to the rail. So I'm next just going to measure the distance between those rails, cut 2 of those pieces to finish forming the box of the drawer. And these are 34 inches and a 1/16 apart. Okay, I got the plywood cut out as the base here. I got the side rails with the drawer slides attached to them here on the sides, and I have the front and rear piece cut. So I'm going to go ahead and glue and screw this together. So what I usually do is this. I prop the drawer up on some scrap 2x4s and glue and clamp the sides and then the front and back pieces, making sure to line each up carefully. Once they are clamped, I go ahead and flip the whole thing over and screw the drawer bottom in from below. Pay close attention to the width of your drawer sides. If it is a little too wide or a little too narrow, the drawer will be hard to open and close. I then drive a long screw in from each end of the sides into the front or rear of the 2x3 drawer frames. The gap above the drawer rail leaves plenty of room for these screws. Okay, pretty good. Now let's see if it fits. Line it up on that side. Line it up there. Shove it in there. And there you go. Pretty good. Nice smooth flow. Easy to open. Good strong drawer. The last thing I do is put a front on it. I usually use something like a 1x6 cedar board, typically found in fences, held in with 4 or 5 screws. I leave a gap at the top to stick my fingers in to open it, as knobs or handles could catch on to clothes or tools. Okay, I went ahead and added an LED strip at the top and power strips on the side. And that's it. It looks pretty good. We are all done. We started out with just a 2 foot by 4 foot workbench, a regular old shop workbench. Then from there, we went ahead and made it a tall workbench with a 4 foot by 4 foot pegboard and another 2 foot by 4 foot shelf at the top. And then we went ahead and added this nice drawer that can handle quite a lot of weight. So it's quite a little versatile setup. I have been using these for many years, almost 20 years now, in some variety or another, and they are fantastic. They last a very long time. They're easy to take apart and move with you, and easy to mount tools to the top. So that's it. I hope you found this video useful, and if you did, please like and subscribe and follow my other builds.